The boarding gate at JFK International Airport buzzed with the usual rhythm of impatience. Rolling suitcases, murmured announcements, and the rustle of boarding passes. In the middle of it all stood Marcus Hale, a calm, sharply dressed black man in his late 30s. He wore a navy suit tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders, a sleek silver watch glinting under the terminal lights. His demeanor was relaxed but purposeful, the quiet confidence of a man used to being in control of his time. He checked his ticket once more. First class, seat 2A. It wasn't a new experience for him, but this flight was different. He wasn't just flying for business. He was on his way to finalize a major investment deal with SkyPoint Airlines, the very company whose logo gleamed across the boarding gate wall. As the flight attendants prepared for boarding, one of them, Carla Jensen, a woman in her 40s with a perfect bun and an air of practiced politeness, watched Marcus from behind the counter. He didn't seem to fit the picture in her head of a typical first-class passenger. She glanced at his boarding pass as he approached the scanner, her polite smile stiffening into something faintly skeptical. "Good afternoon, sir," she said with forced cheer. "May I see your ticket again?" Marcus handed it over without hesitation. She studied it longer than necessary. "First class. Seat 2A," she repeated, as if the words might change if she said them slowly enough. "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice even. "Is there a problem?" "Oh, no problem at all," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just making sure everything's correct." Her tone carried a subtle edge, the kind that cloaks disbelief in professionalism. "We just don't usually see... I mean, we've had some mix-ups before." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mix-ups?" She chuckled awkwardly. "You'd be surprised how often people grab the wrong ticket. First class can be a little confusing." He tilted his head. "Confusing how?" Carla's face flushed slightly. "Oh, nothing. I didn't mean anything by it." Marcus held her gaze for a moment longer, then gave a polite but sharp smile. "Well, this one's correct. Shall I board now?" "Of course," she said quickly, stepping aside. But as he walked past, she exchanged a glance with her colleague, the kind of unspoken communication that said he doesn't belong here. Inside the plane, Marcus placed his leather briefcase in the overhead bin and took his seat. He noticed the glances almost immediately, the subtle, curious looks from other passengers, the half-smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. A flight attendant offered champagne to the older man beside him but skipped Marcus entirely. When Carla finally came down the aisle, she stopped near his seat again, her tone overly sweet. "Sir, I just wanted to double-check that you're seated correctly. You're in 2A?" Marcus nodded. "Still am." She hesitated. "You're sure you're not supposed to be in business class?" "The next section..." His jaw tightened. "I'm sure. Would you like to see the ticket again?" The man beside him looked uncomfortable now, glancing between them. "He's fine," he muttered under his breath. "Leave him alone." Carla's smile faltered. "Of course. My apologies." She moved down the aisle quickly, pretending to check on another passenger, her cheeks burning. Marcus leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. He'd been through this dance before. The disbelief, the second guesses, the forced smiles. But what Carla couldn't have known was that in less than 24 hours, he'd be sitting across a conference table from SkyPoint's executive board, signing papers that would make him one of the company's newest investors. And technically, her boss's boss's boss. He looked out the window as the engines roared to life, the city lights shrinking below. A small, knowing smile curved his lips. Some lessons, he thought, teach themselves in time. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber as the plane leveled out above the clouds. A quiet hum filled the first-class cabin, the sound of engines, polite conversation, and the clink of crystal glasses. Marcus sat calmly in his seat, reading a briefing document on his tablet, though he wasn't really focused on the words. He was still thinking about that look the flight attendant had given him, the quick flicker of judgment disguised as routine procedure. He'd seen it before in boardrooms, restaurants, hotels, even elevators. It wasn't always loud, but it was always there. The quiet disbelief that someone like him could belong somewhere like this. Across the aisle, a white couple chatted with Carla, laughing about their vacation in Italy. She poured them champagne with a warm smile, leaning in as if they were old friends. When she finally turned toward Marcus, her tone cooled a few degrees. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" she asked. Yes, Marcus said evenly. I'll have the champagne, please. Her smile tightened. That's reserved for our first-class guests. The beverage list for business class is different. He raised an eyebrow. And what class am I sitting in, Ms. Jensen? She hesitated, realizing what she'd just said. Of course, my mistake. Champagne it is. She poured the drink quickly, her hands a little less steady now. Enjoy. Thank you, he said, his tone polite but firm. I intend to. The man sitting next to Marcus glanced over. An older executive type with graying hair and a Rolex. You handled that better than I would have, he murmured quietly. Marcus smiled faintly without looking up. You get used to it. The rest of the flight passed in relative quiet, but the energy had shifted. The other attendants, noticing Carla's stiffness around Marcus, grew awkward in their own interactions. One brought him the wrong meal and apologized profusely. Another avoided eye contact altogether. Through it all, Marcus remained calm, composed, even gracious. Years of experience had taught him that dignity was its own kind of armor. About an hour before landing, turbulence shook the plane. Carla hurried down the aisle to check that everyone was secure. As she passed Marcus, she noticed his tablet screen, a corporate deck displaying the SkyPoint Airlines Investment Division logo. Her brow furrowed. Oh, she said lightly. I didn't know passengers could access company files like that. Marcus looked up, amused. Company files? Yes, she said, laughing nervously. SkyPoint internal documents are confidential. You might want to close that before someone... I'm allowed, Marcus said, cutting her off gently. I helped write it. Her smile faltered. I'm sorry. You what? He turned the screen toward her. His name was right there in bold on the first slide. Marcus D. Hale, Strategic Partner, Hale Capital Group. And beneath it, Investment Partner, SkyPoint Airlines Expansion Initiative. Carla's throat went dry. You work with SkyPoint? Marcus nodded. You could say that. I'm joining the board tomorrow morning. The color drained from her face. She tried to find words, but none came. Her polished professionalism cracked just slightly, her lips parting in disbelief. I hope, Marcus continued, that the staff training program I've been reading about is as effective as they say. It talks a lot about equity and customer experience. His tone was even, not cruel, but his meaning was clear. Carla's mouth opened, then closed again. Mr. Hale, I didn't mean... He raised a hand, silencing her gently. It's all right. I'm sure you didn't. Enjoy the rest of your shift, Ms. Jensen. As she walked away, her heart pounding, Marcus turned back to his tablet. Outside the window, the horizon burned orange and gold as the sun began to rise. The plane glided forward, steady and smooth. Marcus took a sip of champagne, the taste crisp and cold. The same drink she had almost refused him an hour ago. He smiled to himself, not out of pride, but out of quiet irony. People saw what they expected, but life had a way of rewriting expectations mid-flight. The plane touched down smoothly at Heathrow, just as morning sunlight began spilling through the cabin windows. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and passengers started reaching for their phones and bags. Marcus stayed seated, calm and patient, scrolling through a few last-minute messages from his assistant. He had a board meeting in 2 hours, one that would change how this airline did business. Carla, meanwhile, felt like she'd swallowed a stone. Every second since their conversation had replayed in her mind on an endless loop. Joining the board. The words echoed louder than the engines had. She'd spent years perfecting her customer service tone, smiling through frustration, managing first-class passengers with flawless poise. But this time, she'd failed spectacularly, not in professionalism, but in character. As passengers began to file out, the captain's voice came over the intercom. We'd like to thank Mr. Marcus Hale for flying with us today and for joining the SkyPoint family in such an exciting new capacity. Heads turned. A few passengers began whispering, connecting the dots. Marcus stood retrieving his briefcase with unhurried grace. Carla froze where she stood by the galley door, color draining from her face. He walked toward her with the same calm confidence he'd had since boarding, maybe even gentler now. Ms. Jensen, he said. His voice was measured, low, but carried the weight of authority. Good flight. She stammered, Mr. Hale, I, I had no idea, sir. I didn't mean. He smiled politely, stopping her. I know you didn't. Then, after a pause, but you should have treated me the same way even if you did. Her throat tightened. There was nothing to say. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gloat, didn't punish. His calm was far heavier than anger could have been. You'll have a good team briefing soon, he continued almost conversationally. We'll be talking a lot about training, culture, and how people see value in others. Carla nodded weakly, eyes glassy. Yes, sir, I understand. Marcus gave a courteous nod, then stepped off the plane. As he entered the terminal, a group of airline executives was waiting, including the CEO, who greeted him with a handshake and a wide grin. Cameras flashed. Carla watched from the doorway as her passenger, the one she doubted, second-guessed, nearly dismissed, walked away surrounded by the most powerful people in the company. When the executives brought him back later that morning for a press announcement, Carla was stationed again near the entrance, straightening her uniform, heart pounding. The CEO introduced Marcus to the staff formally. Please welcome Mr. Marcus Hale, SkyPoint's newest strategic investor and advisory board member. The man helping us build a better, more inclusive airline. The room applauded. Marcus spoke briefly, thanking the company for its vision. But then his tone shifted, subtle yet clear. Respect, he said, isn't just a slogan we print in brochures. It's something you live. In every conversation, every seat, every aisle. You never know who you're serving. You never know who's watching, and you never know whose story you're a part of. The words hung in the air like sunlight through clouds. Carla stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes lowered but her heart heavy with understanding. When Marcus finished, she approached quietly as the crowd dispersed. Mr. Hale, she said softly, thank you for what you said in there. I learned something today. He smiled faintly with no trace of resentment. Good, he said. That means the flight wasn't wasted. She let out a shaky laugh, the kind that comes from relief and regret mingling together. No, sir, it wasn't. He nodded once more, then turned toward the waiting photographers. Carla stepped back, watching as he posed beside the CEO, calm, poised, and radiant in his quiet strength. The same man she had doubted hours ago now stood as the face of the airline's future. And as the flashes went off, one thought echoed in her mind like a lesson branded in light. Never assume who belongs where, because true class has nothing to do with a seat number. Months after the ceremony at City Hall, Jamal's murals had become landmarks. Tourists mapped routes to see them all, from the dove on the police precinct to the mural of the Phoenix on Martin Luther King Drive. The city, once gray and weary, now pulsed with color, alive with a story on every corner. But the murals weren't just decorations. They were mirrors. They reflected struggle, love, unity, and reminded people what it meant to belong. One crisp autumn morning, Officer Reynolds stood outside the same wall where he'd first stopped Jamal a year ago. The gray concrete was gone, replaced by a massive, breathtaking mural of hands painting a city in color, a young boy in the corner holding a spray can like a torch. At the bottom, painted in Jamal's looping signature, were the words, "Hope doesn't ask for permission." Reynolds stared at it for a long time. The sunlight hit the wall just right, making the colors glow as if alive. He remembered that night, the arrogance in his tone, the smirk he wore when he mocked a kid who just wanted to paint. Shame tightened in his chest. For decades, he had patrolled the city without really seeing it. He saw threats, not stories. Faces, not souls. But now, thanks to that kid, he saw it all. He walked into the precinct, passing by the mural Jamal had painted months earlier. His colleagues greeted him, and he nodded absently. For the first time, he requested to speak at a local youth event, something no one expected from him. That weekend, he stood before a room of high school students in the same community he once dismissed. He took a deep breath and said, "There was a time I thought paint on a wall was a problem. But I was wrong. The real problem was that I never stopped to ask why it was there." The room fell silent. That young man, Jamal Carter, taught me something. Sometimes people just need a wall that listens. The crowd erupted in applause, but Reynolds didn't smile. He just looked relieved, like a man who had finally learned to forgive himself. Meanwhile, across the city, Jamal stood on a scaffold downtown, painting the final touches of his most ambitious mural yet. It stretched across an entire building, a sweeping panorama of people from all walks of life, painting the skyline together, their colors blending into a single, radiant horizon. The mayor had commissioned it as part of a new civic initiative, but for Jamal, it was personal. As he stepped back to admire the finished work, Malik, his best friend, called up from below. Bro, they're saying this might be your last one here before you go national. You realize that? Jamal grinned. I'm not going anywhere. The city still has walls that need listening. That evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, the mural caught the light. The entire city seemed to shimmer in color. People gathered below, snapping photos, smiling, pointing upward. Jamal watched from the roof, quiet and humble. A soft breeze lifted the corner of his jacket, and for a moment, he thought of the boy he used to be, the one standing in the rain, with a spray can and a dream, mocked by a man who couldn't see his worth. He smiled to himself. They see it now, he whispered. Far below, Officer Reynolds stood in the crowd, looking up at the mural with awe. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a cop, just a man standing in front of something pure, something bigger than pride or power. He tipped his hat slightly, almost like a salute. The city lights flickered on, reflecting off the colors of Jamal's work, painting the streets with the same hues that once only existed in his imagination. And for a moment, just a moment, everyone stopped to look up. They didn't see a boy who once broke rules. They saw the artist who rebuilt their world.